Been working on it. What's ironic about this is because it's for the nesting season is the farmers are actually, there's no water out there, so the birds are drowning in their water tanks, and so the farmers are floating boards, 2x4s, 2x6s, so that the birds land on the 2x4s, the 2x6s, and they don't drown. So the very people that need the CRP the most are the ones that are actually keeping the birds alive. So
if it's okay with you, Commissioner, I'll change cards with you.
Okay.
And talk to our folks that are Farm Bill experts, and we'll find out what's happening at least down here. That's really interesting.
Okay. Another thing on the GOCO funding. So we have McPhee Lake here. We're three hours away from Lake Powell. We closed down a lot of our lakes because we're worried about the mussel invasion, and here would be a novice idea. How about we put all of our efforts on Lake Powell where the mussel actually is and force those people to decontaminate their boats before they leave there instead of trying to put an inspector on 1,000 lakes in Colorado.
Director, would you like to respond?
Oh, yes, I would.
Former Arizona.
Yeah. We've tried for a very long time with the National Park Service in the states of Arizona and Utah on that. And for a long, long time, boats can get in and out of Lake Powell at will. And I know they've put in some inspection stations down there. I totally agree with you. Let's go with the source. The problem is the source now is all around us, from Kansas, Nebraska, even now in Montana. But yeah, Lake Powell, our information is, you're absolutely right, especially being right here, you're real close, that we've been applying a lot of pressure on the National Park Service, the states of Utah and Arizona to really crack down on that. The problem is you leave the lake at midnight, you just get on your boat and you go. And most of the contaminated boats that we've intercepted have been from Lake Powell. They're leaving in the middle of the night, and so the gates, attendance and inspection stations are gone, but the gates are still open, and that's a huge problem. So we could definitely partner with you on some of that pressure.
And then one last thing, we've got the desert bighorn down there in the Dolores River Canyon, and we're catching problem lions, and we're taking them, we're turning them down there where we're trying to grow the desert bighorn. So we was wondering if you could take the problem lions somewhere else so they don't kill all of our desert bighorns. Thank you.
Bring them to Las Palmas County, please.
We'll take that under advisement. Thank you very much, Commissioner. We always appreciate it when county commissioners can help us out.
You can take those to Boulder.
I'm going to resist commenting on that. Mr. Brian Lewis, if you could come forward.
I'm Brian Lewis. I think you all know why I'm here. I want the commission to do something about our declining elk numbers before it's a big problem. I'd like to ask you to consider doing away with an over-the-counter either sex tag during their breeding season. It's crazy to have that many people up there chasing them when they're trying to breed. I believe that's why your calf numbers are way down. Basically, the only reason I'm here.
Well, we appreciate you coming. Commissioners, any comments or questions? Commissioner Cahill.
Just a comment from my area anyhow. I'm on the southern border of Colorado in Los Animas County, which is a ways from here, but we have the same thing. But the pregnancy rates of the cows that we are checking are 90 to 95%. So I don't think that's a problem, at least in western Los Animas County.
Well, I can tell you on the ground, they're not here, the calves.
No, something's happening after they get, after conception, something is happening between then and 1 year later. We've just funded a study. This commission approved it last month to do a full-blown study on that exact problem, and the commission is providing some of our funds for that. Not
Commissioner-
our personal funds, but it's a reserve that we can utilize for things like that.
Commissioner Bray.
Yeah, I share your pain. By the breeding season, are you referring to the archery seasons?
Yes, and I'm an archery hunter. I archery hunt all the time. I'm totally for archery hunting, but it gets more popular every year, and there's no limit to how many people come here hunting. And I don't know if your area is the same as mine, but it's grown a lot.
Yeah, it really has. I think this whole calf recruitment issue, and as my fellow commissioner just eloquently stated, we're going to study it really, really hard, and we're going to push these studies. But I think the cows might be getting bred, but we're losing the calves. But there's no question that the increase in the archery experience is probably a partial factor. It won't be the only one, but and we're going to have we're going to instigate this year a 5-year season structure discussion, and this is a perfect topic to take up during that discussion. So please stay in tune and play a role as the year progresses when we start having discussions on our future 5-year season structure, because we can potentially address some of these issues through that process.
Okay, and I'd also like to say, I think you guys may or may not know, but I'm a sportsman. I buy a lot of licenses. I think you guys charge way too little money for the animals that are being hunted. I think you could do more if you charge for a quality product, raise the quality price.
I totally agree there, too.
There's my guy.
We'll get our representatives running another bill next year.
Where were you when we were in committee?
Probably had a job somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll make an observation, which is our contact information for individual commissioners is up on the website. So there's a lot of ways to follow up with us.
I'd just make a real quick comment. I come from an area that is draw, pretty severely restricted, but we have the same problem. We have low cow-calf, and so I don't think that's all the problem. It's not working in our area. We have to keep searching for the good answer, the excellent answer, as Craig said.
And just for the record, that was Commissioner Peisel.
Gosh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Ken Curtis, if you could please come forward.
Hi, I'm Ken Curtis with Dolores Water Conservancy, Dolores Water, DWCD, it doesn't matter. Our president and manager happen to be traveling on some previously scheduled, so duties as assigned fell to the engineer. So normally I work with numbers, but today I'm here to welcome you guys. We're just on the other side of the hotel, and since you don't get down here too often, we thought we'd be remiss if we didn't welcome you and recognize a long-standing, positive, and growing working relationship. With that said, Dolores Water exists to contract with Reclamation to run the Dolores project up the hill, McPhee Dam. With that, that's what created Lone Dome that you went and saw this morning. On top of that, we had direct flow rights that could dry up the river historically over 100 years that established this valley and gave us the great water rights and the life we have. With that, we now have wet water that's going downriver right now today that would not have been there pre-dam in this kind of drought. It would have been dry. You would have seen nothing but cobbles. So it's really important that you recognize this federal partnership that we happen to operate that started this. With that, we also have water coming onto this side for the wetlands, federal, Totten, even local Denny Lake sometimes. We bring some of that water over to the tribes. Ute Mountain Ute tribe uses Fish and Wildlife water for some of their game management over on the below the Ute. So we've got this great relationship, and it continues going forward. Just as a little personal history, about a decade, mine started with David Graff and Jim White, teaching me about water, fish, and downstream flows all the way to the San Miguel. We continue to operate very closely with them on the monitoring and recommendation team. Since then, it's been Elizabeth Brown teaching me about mussels. After that, it was Robert Walters, Jim Greffley, educating me a little bit more on mussels. Also came from Jim White. Of late, it's been Reed DeWalt, Doug Krieger, Doug Vilsack, who we've been trying to help organize getting these new funding streams passed. And now Pat Dorsey and Matt Thorpe have been helping us on the ground. And when I say one of the benefits of being in this local rural area is we have, as you heard from Commissioner Sukla, we work very closely with both Dolores County, earlier with Steve Karcher, Montezuma County, and we're always reminding our representatives and, and Senator Coram, and they already knew the issue. So we're all pretty well know what the issues are here, and although we may not always agree 100%, we're constantly talking, keeping them informed, and getting their guidance and buy-in. And so it'll be really interesting to see how the biking issue goes, because we saw the same thing in funding these mussels. And we're not done yet, as you heard from the commissioner. So we're with you on anything you need from us. But it's been a great partnership, and we want to keep it going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind words. Next up is Mr. Dale Smith, if you could come forward. Welcome, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. On behalf of the sportsmen in Southwest Colorado, we want to welcome you to Montezuma and Dolores counties. It's also locally kind of referred to as the Montelores area. My name's Dale Smith. I live here in Cortez. I've been a resident of Southwest Colorado since 1982. I currently serve as the Vice President of the Dolores River Anglers chapter of Trout Unlimited. If there are any media representatives here besides Mr. Mimiaja, I've got a copy of my notes I'll be glad to share with you. When I speak in public, I always make that available so there's no confusion about what I said. Ms. Dorsey remembers me from teaching Hunter Ed. I want to digress a little bit from what I said, what I've got in my prepared statement. When we went from 3 big game rifle hunting seasons to 4, we were told it was to spread out the hunters and to make that a better hunting experience. Perhaps we need to do that with the primitive means of take with the muzzle loading and archery. Maybe there's something we can do by spreading out the tags, spreading out the season that would address the problem Mr. Lewis speaks to. As a hunter and a fisherman, I've seen exactly what he's talking about. I know that a lot of times the public comments that you hear in your meetings are usually a lot of complaints and generally negative dialogue. This afternoon, I have some positive comments to make.
Thank you very much.
Today, we would like to thank you on the behalf of the sportspersons of Southwest Colorado for 2 very conscientious CPW employees. First of all, we want to publicly thank District Wildlife Manager Andy Brown. And Andy was here, he's back in the corner. We want to thank him for his help over the years in securing fish for the annual Cortez Community Fishing Derby held in June of each year at Park DeVita here in Cortez. The Fishing Derby is an annual community fishing festival that is sponsored by the Dolores River Anglers chapter of Trout Unlimited and the Parks and Recreation Department of the City of Cortez. We'd also like to say that Andy is always approachable, he's courteous, he's professional, and he's down to earth. And when you've got the kids and your community dependent on fish being in that pond at the park for that fishing festival, and this is going to be the 9th year we've done this, you got to have somebody you can depend on. The only thing that scares the dickens out of me is that Andy's leaving tomorrow for vacation. I hope somebody's going to follow through and let us know that, yes, the fish did get in the pond. We would also like to commend CPW Area Aquatic Biologist Jim White. I don't believe Jim's here. I didn't see him. We want to recognize him for his help with identifying and protecting remnant conservation populations of cutthroat trout in some of our high mountain streams that are tributaries of the Dolores River watershed. We have worked with him for several years with fin sampling to determine the DNA of some of these populations. Jim has a true love for fish and conserving the fish of Colorado. Members of our TU chapter have assisted him on several occasions with kokanee salmon spawning, in addition to the fin sampling that we've done. And we come away with a unique understanding of the process of aquatics fisheries management, our fisheries management. We want to thank CPW for the establishment of the Twin Spruce Pond State Wildlife Area. Those of us that live in this county have driven past that area for years. And after the gravel pits that were there were all mined out and the water seeped in through the water table because it's so close to the Dolores River, we were just itching to get to fish there. It's a great community resource. People in this community can access it actually easier than they can McPhee Reservoir for fishing. And it's great to see families and kids there fishing. And it's also a fishing resource for tourists. I have met tourists there from Connecticut that enjoyed it so much. They joined our TU chapter. They got an address in Connecticut, but we'll take anybody that wants. That's one of the neat things about TU. The closest thing to something negative that I've got to say is that the signage that directs sports persons to the Fish Creek State Wildlife Area sometimes mysteriously disappears. Well, we've got an idea, and there's a perception in the public what's going on. The Fish Creek State Wildlife Area is located in a very unique place. Access to that state wildlife area is through 3 parcels of private land, and local folks think that the local landowners may be behind those signs disappearing. Public perception of this situation is amazing, and you can talk to people locally, and that's what they're going to tell you. Whether it is legally founded or not, locals believe that if no one uses the right-of-way through those 3 pieces of private land, then the right-of-way may be challenged in court, and we could lose access to that state wildlife area. That state wildlife area is a small area, but it allows an amazing amount of the San Juan National Forest to be accessible. Fish Creek is an excellent fishery. It's also a great place to hunt. And I know a number of outfitters that operate out of there. Perhaps CPW and DWMs can work with local law enforcement to monitor this situation. I also want to thank you for streaming your commission meetings on the internet. For me as a retired teacher on a limited income, it's great to have that resource. I can sit at home in my office, in my home office, and see what you guys are doing, and I really appreciate the work that you folks do. But it's a great way for the people of Colorado to see what's going on. This is the 3rd Wildlife Commission meeting that I've visited since I retired from teaching back in '02. I learned something every time, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for the job that you folks do for the sports persons of Colorado. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, and thank you for those kind words. Commissioners, any comments or questions? Commissioner Wingfield.
You know, we travel around the state so local people can come in, be closer, and this is the first time 8 years since I was on the Wildlife Commission and the Parks and Wildlife Commission we've ever been in Cortez. And just to make me feel better, when I head 10 hours of drive time home tomorrow, how many people in the room are within 50 miles of Cortez? There's a lot of faces in the crowd. I've never seen it. It's worth the trip over here, guys. Thanks.
When I go to state meetings, I always emphasize to folks, the TU meetings, that the road is longer from Denver to Cortez than it is from Cortez to Denver, and that's the idea a lot of folks in Denver have about us.
Exactly. I'm about 3.5 hours out of Denver either way, and people say, well, we'll be out there at so and such time for a meeting, and they're always an hour or so late. We said, we know how long it takes to get to Denver. You ought to figure this one out. You guys got a beautiful place here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will just comment, we have had more public comment in this meeting than I can recall in years. So I'm very grateful to the community for turning out. Mr. Gill?
Unless we have a meeting near Boulder and we talk about wolves, then we get more public.
Suppose that's my fault for having said anything. That was Commissioner Vigil on that.
That wasn't me.
Well,
I'm Dexter Gill from.
Welcome, Mr. Gill.
And actually Lewis out here, where I was born. And my granddad was a homesteader up on the Dolores River rim, and mother used to drive cows down to water down where he was at this morning, down there below Lone Dome. Glad they got water down there still, Mr. Curtis. I didn't know how many commissioners there were, so like the last gentleman, I got copies for you. My statements. I tried to keep it under 3 minutes, like you said, so I wrote it out ahead of time so we could make sure. And I'll have to read fast to make it then.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Gill.
Get up where I can see it. The concern of many of us have is that wildlife and recreation issues have taken precedence over lands, waters, economies, and people by some of them in our country. Our country was founded on the principle of private land ownership and control. That basic tenet provided for farmers, ranchers, miners, developed to manage the landscape, resulting in today's diversity of vegetation and water retention and distribution, all of which improved diversity and quantity of fauna and flora. In Montezuma County, only 27% of the land is in private ownership and control. All the rest of the lands of the state are in federal control. There has been a gradual transfer of private lands back into federal or even state ownership and control. The federal controlled lands have ceased active management and improvement, negatively affecting many wildlife species. Wildlife numbers and diversity increased following settlement by farmers, ranchers, and loggers, but has been erratic and now declining following cessation of active forest and range management by the federal agencies. 40% of our state's public lands in federal control have been withdrawn from land and vegetative resource improvement and conservation, resulting in decreased water and food sources for wildlife. This has resulted in an increase in wildlife use of the private farm and ranch areas, which is the smallest land base in southwest Colorado. Rural landowners enjoy and are very interested in helping to maintain a healthy wildlife base. However, all too often the federal and even some state agencies do not respect private individuals and land ownership rights, but rather place wildlife enforcement above the people. Wildlife management is somewhat of a misnomer, as you can't actually manage something you can't control. You can manage the vegetation of the forest and range for the benefit of the wildlife and man, but we are not. We have chosen instead to attempt to control man in his use of the forest, range, wildlife, and even his private land holdings. This has resulted in increasing animosity locally and statewide, but there is a solution. We in the Four Corners 912 project, which I'm part of, would propose that the DPW recognize the state constitution establishes the county commissioners as the only legal representative of the people in a county, with a responsibility for the health, safety, and welfare of all within the county. That is, the lands, resources, and the people. DPW can establish formal coordination processes whereby the local DPW wildlife and parks managers work with the county in a joint effort to meet the plans and management needs of the county in protecting the private land rights, rather than simply telling the county what the agencies are doing and superficially seeking county acceptance. This would be building local governance and control, not allowing outside activist controls over county and economies and land and resource management. Previous gentlemen, several of them, talking about many of the issues, it comes down to there's nobody really to coordinate all the desires and demands are placed on all the different agencies. The DPW, a lot of special interests, whether it's bikers or whether it's fishermen or whatever. Each one of them wants their thing. Forest Service, same thing happens to them. BLM, same thing happens to them. And there's no controlling agent, but the county commissioners, actually by law, are the only one that is responsible for the overall health and safety of the county and the welfare, be it economic and use of our resources. So it's just very fractured, and it brings animosity between each of the agencies and between the user groups. You have motorbikers can't stand to see a flat mountain biker on the trail. Hikers don't want to see either one of them, and vice versa. And so all of them are vying to each agency to get their thing passed. And nobody is looking out for the whole county as a whole. And by law, the county commissioners have that responsibility. They're accountable to the people. None of you, or the BLM or the Forest Service, are accountable to the people, or nor do they have the responsibility for our welfare. So we're just asking that we begin a new beginning of this being a state agency, to work with our counties and recognize, hey, we need to work with the counties in establishing these needs, be it wildlife, elk habitat, whatever. What is the overall picture for the county? Our county has a land use plan. Does all everybody wants to do meet in compliance with our land use plan? That's what we should be doing. So that's what we really propose. Hey, let's set up a format to work with our local people. Now, I would like to say we have a very good working relationship with Mr. Thorpe, your district manager here, and we really appreciate him. He's been very responsive and helpful, and so I think he would be responsive to your direction to begin working in a really, I might say, a pilot project that would be DPW working with the county to make something happen right. And it's going to be requiring to balance the stuff between Forest Service and BLM lands with your needs, but it fits in with the whole county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Commissioners, any comments or questions? Thank you very much. Next up, and unless there's any other public comment, this will be our last, is, I apologize, I'm not sure I've got the handwriting right. Is it Kellen Lovett?
That's correct.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Kellen Lovett. I was born and been fortunate to spend most of my life here in Montezuma County. I'll be the first one to say that one of the things I'm most passionate about is hunting, elk hunting specifically, and I would really like to be able to go hunt elk in my backyard every year. But more importantly to me is to see that future generations and hopefully someday my grandchildren can share a little bit of what I've been blessed with. And that's what brings me here to speak today. I've been pretty fortunate to hunt big game in most all western states. One thing that I've observed is specific to elk is Colorado, in my opinion, hands down has the best elk habitat of any western state. That's probably why we have the most elk. But on the contrary to that, I feel like, and it's no secret amongst all you commissioners, that the elk herds are dwindling pretty bad, and there's a lot of problems. A couple of the things that I've heard you guys ask questions about, things like that today multiple times, is, you know, the calf recruitment. And earlier in the day, Commissioner Brace asked something about getting some predator statistics. I'd be willing to bet that the #1 predator for elk is hunters. And the variable that we have there in Colorado that no other state has, and I'd encourage you guys to look into it, is the sale of any over-the-counter tag. So whether it's archery or muzzleloading or first rifle season or fourth rifle season, everybody I know of, including myself, if I don't draw a first rifle elk tag or a muzzleloader tag, I'm going to get an archery tag or a second or a third tag. I'm still going to be out there putting pressure on the elk, even if I don't harvest one. I'm chasing those cows around that have been bred, and maybe that could lead to the statewide calf recruitment problem, is the fact that we've got 3 months of the hardest hunting out of any state by far. That's, in my opinion, probably leading to the destruction of our elk herd. So I'm just here today to encourage you guys to maybe adopt a draw system entirely for the elk. I don't see how we can continue to manage these elk with the variable of over-the-counter tags. In the last 4 or 5 years, I've seen a lot of people from Wyoming, Nevada, Montana, places that they used to be able to hunt elk in their state with relative ease, and those states have cut back the tags because of wolves. So subsequently, here in southwest Colorado, and probably across the whole state for that matter, there's more hunting pressure coming from all directions. As other states tighten up on their elk management, it seems like those people are getting pushed harder and harder towards us, and I think that you need to look at it as a whole. And I just ask that maybe you guys could adopt a drawing system entirely for elk to help manage and take some of the wild cards out of this equation.
Thank you. Commissioners, any comments or questions? Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Commissioner Peisel.
It's something to think about. We have a lot of variables, and we're not sure what the problem is, but certainly in the valley, I see over-the-counter hunting, and I'm wondering if it's not time. We have so many people coming to the state. It's not time to think about something like that.
You guys also earlier, this is a little bit off track, and not really my position, but I've done a lot of research. I send in a lot of other states, and I look at some of the other states' revenues from drawing. Mr. Lewis said earlier about maybe raising the price of a premium elk hunt. I think that you guys could raise the price of your draws in general. There's not one other state that I apply in that I'm not required to buy a $150 minimal small game hunting license to put in for anything, whether it's elk, deer, sheep, antelope, anything. So I think that there's, by making it a draw, I think that there's also an opportunity there for a lot more income for your agency.
Commissioner Wingfield.
We get a lot of testimony that introduction of wolves would really help the habitat here. You're not a follower of that.
No, sir.
Just want to be clear on that.
As a follow-up to
Commissioner
that,
Bray.
to Commissioner Vihil's comment, I guarantee if you have a wolf reintroduction meeting here in Cortez, you'll have just as many people as you had in Boulder. But they may have a slightly different view.
I don't believe that meeting was in Boulder. No.
It was close. It was close enough.
Thanks very much. I would encourage you to be part of our 5-year planning process that we're getting ready to start into, and there'll be a lot of public consultation here, and so that'd be helpful if you would participate.
Absolutely, I'd love to. On my paper there, you've got my phone number and email address. I'd love to get some information on how I could be a part of that, and I'll definitely follow up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our public comment, which, oh, pardon me, that's right, Commissioner Hassel.
There's no one here talking about the preference points, but we did get a lot of emails, and I would like to say a couple of things. I know that Director Broscheid talked about it a little bit, but I would like to see, I know you're going to bring some stuff to us, but the numbers from this year versus last year on actual preference points. And I'd also like to know if in units that require a large number of preference points, did the applicants go up in those also? And some comparisons about what other states charge and what they do in their preference point system compared to what we do. And
Thank you, Commissioner.
I have one other thing. Today we heard a little bit about all the fires in the state and firefighting, and I know actually in our own areas, like in Grand Junction, we've had Island Acres, we've had Wild Horse, or Horse Thief, sorry. We've got what's going over here in the Southwest. What do we do for our employees? Do we teach them anything? And do all of our trucks have fire extinguishers? There's a lot of roadside fires that are started from like a trailer chain, something like that, that can very easily be put out. And we have trucks all over the place in this state. Is that something, I don't know if we do that or not.
Director, do you want to address that?
Yeah, Commissioner, I believe it's standard safety equipment for all of our vehicles. First aid kit, fire extinguishers, and certainly probably the most important is either your cell phone, your mobile phone, or a radio. mobile radio unit. So, yeah, that's definitely a good question about what we have, and we have used a lot of fire extinguishers at times. So,
Okay. Do we offer any training to any of our employees? Like, I know when I went by Horse Thief, our employees were out there right next to the firefighters helping people.
I'm not sure we do fire training. I think there's probably some fire red card certifications out there somewhere, but I don't think we send our folks through firefighter training.
Okay, well, not necessarily firefighter, but just some kind of, yeah, something to look at so they have a little bit of an idea.
Yeah.
So are our officers allowed to help in fire situations like that? Yes, that's not what they're trained for. There's nothing to hold them back on that, or?
I'm going way out on the limb, Commissioner Wingfield, but I know our at a minimum, our law enforcement officers get pulled in and do either evacuations or crowd control, security for evacuated areas. So they're the law enforcement.
You know, a couple of years ago, I pulled off the highway to help some idiot out of a snowdrift, and the wildlife officer beat me to it, and he pulled the guy out. He said, "I'm not allowed to do that." You know, it was a hell of a gesture, I thought, for him to come off. He was busy on something else, and he saw somebody in trouble. And he helped him. He said, "Well, we're not allowed to do that." And I didn't know if that went on to other things like that or not, so. I didn't know where our liability ended on that.
At least the good emails I receive is thanks for officers. They'll do just about anything for anybody.
That's what I found out, but I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, fires, going on hot fires is you got to be certified very well, trained and certified, as you all know. So,
You know, in rural areas, everybody's a firefighter when there's a fire.
Absolutely, you bet.
Thank you, Commissioners. Okay, I'm just going to pull a little bit of an audible before we do the consent agenda. If Southeast Regional Manager Dan Prinsloo could come forward, that would be great. I want to just say that I am the cause of this 5-minute presentation. I saw this very small expenditure at Greater Outdoors Colorado in our committee meeting, which I fully support the expenditure, but it touches on things that are in every newspaper around the world right now. And so I just asked Dan to give us a slight update on this expenditure. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Chairman and Director, Commissioners. Dan Prenzel, Southeast Regional Manager, for your information on this afternoon's discussion on drones. And I will start off with maybe a little humor. Commissioner Vigil told me, please don't drone on about drones. So it's late. I'll work on that. The second thing I would, maybe with a little humor in mind, I might answer Commissioner Piezel's question. You have good elk over here and bad elk over here, and there's, same precipitation and a hill, and what's the difference? Well, I would say the good elk is in the southeast region, and so it's good management. So I'll just leave that one. We can talk about that one over drinks tonight.
Ouch.
That would be the only specific difference that I could come up with. Safari Club, the Colorado chapter, the Safari Club International, is a very big supporter of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and had some funding and decided they would love to donate about a $10,000 drone to Parks and Wildlife for our use if we could use it, which I'll get into some of the uses. And we said we might be interested in that. My employee came and asked me about that, and I said, well, we take that under advisement. We talked about it, the director and the leadership team, and said, more than glad to think about that as long as it's a very structured use and we have an administrative procedure governing the use of that in all aspects of that. So that's what we decided to do. Unless you've been living under a rock, the use of drones or UASs, which are unmanned aircraft systems, is astronomically growing for all different kinds of things, ag use, blah, blah, blah. And so we decided we'd get in the game, and I'll get into the reasons. So we tried that, or we are doing that. We agreed to look into that. We accepted the drone This drone is a good enough drone. It can carry 2 different cameras, and to be as effective, we want to try out all the things we can or can't do with it. The 2 cameras are, one is an infrared camera, and one is a really highly zoomable video and or still camera that goes like 40 power zoom. And those technology is changing by the day, but some of those cameras are about $10,000 a piece. So innovative employees saw Ms. Urbanik and GoCo because the drone was purchased, but we didn't have any funds for the cameras. Hence how we get here. So there was an application to the Director's Innovation Fund to fund some of the cameras to try this out. That's out what got us to the question. So I'm going to give you the real quick 2-minute tour of where we're at in the agency about the use of drones. So the purpose of our view and why we're looking at UASs with NCPW is to provide support and improve the effectiveness of all branches of our management in Parks and Wildlife. What types of things do we think that will include? Biological surveys, LEC counts, even the infrared. You can fly over early in the morning or late at night and count lesser prairie chickens without ever leaving your office, technically. Law enforcement and public safety, fire management, control of parks and wildlife properties, leases, game damage. We've paid independent people to use drones to fly over cornfields to assess game damage that we're liable for. So instead of paying somebody else, we can do those kind of things. Video production, search and rescue, engineering and capital, real estate, and surveys. So that's just a quick list of some of the things we believe these machines will do. The machine I'm talking about is a really high-end one. There are way less costly UASs that we could use, but they can't carry the weight and the time that the one that I was talking about earlier can. So currently, any drone use in this agency, we in our discussion, because we're working on the administrative directive and we're also working on a flight operations plan, that those both will come to the director for his signature prior to that. So any use within the agency, we were or have been decommissioned unless they get regional manager or assistant director approval. We did have a few little flights, nothing, you know, it was all good stuff, but we said until we have a good administrative directive delineating what you can and can't do on that. So it's by individual permission to do it now. We are about 90 to 95% done with our draft of the administrative directive, and we'll finish that here pretty quickly. And let's see, that directive will guide employees on approval, maintenance, acquisition, and the use of those UASs in accordance with the FAA rules and state law. And again, I think I did mention that we're working on a flight operations manual. So that's really a quick update. We're excited about trying this. We don't know. We believe, I mean, there's times we talked about biological surveys. Instead of putting our employees up in a plane and a pilot, you know, you can fly over on some of the tours we were talking with Commissioner Bray. You could fly a drone over there, take a picture, go right back to your office and count cow calf and be 100% accurate instead of chasing them down with a helicopter. So there are a lot of different things we can do, but we're getting into the business, and that's my update, unless there's any questions.
Commissioners, I just wanted you to hear it because it's a combination of a thermal. I have used a thermal site out of state raccoon hunting, and I was shocked at what you could look through. And so, to me, the issue here would be, I can't believe anyone in our agency would misuse this. But if it was misused and got into the press, I think it would be incredibly difficult. So that's why I wanted to bring it to your attention. I'm glad to hear about the policies because that's the answer. So,
Mr. Chairman, real quick, that Dan hit on that, and sort of driving behind the policy. And Dan and Heather both have been, all the regional managers have been input, but we understand the sensitivities with drones. Legislature's been wrestling with drones, Highway Patrol. We're sensitive to that, and particularly when you talk about private property rights. The intent of this policy is no different than if we were to, hunters to ask permission to go hunting, or an officer is coming out to look, or we're looking at elk counts, or for, the drones are not going to just fly over private land and then vanish. And so there's going to be this, the private landowner is going to concede and approve the use of any of our drones on their lands as well. But, and also the flights, we're going to be very, very transparent with where these drones are being used by who and when. So like helicopter flights, I get calls all the time, is your survey helicopters are scaring away all the elk, and that led to some complaints in this country, and those aren't our helicopters, but we want to be able to say, no, that was not our drone. So we're really going to be very sensitive to the transparency and use of drones until, or if ever, that those sensitivities kind of vanish. So we're taking that policy very seriously. It's being very slow walked. This is new technology. Others have jumped in with both feet. We figured that, with our use in private property, other lands out there, and then the sensitivities that go with that, we need to be very careful about this and very restrictive. But at the same time, like Dan said, one of the biggest benefits of this is putting our biologists in aircraft flying midwinter waterfowl surveys during the middle of the winter, really low. A lot of accidents have happened. A lot of accidents in helicopters that maybe this drone use could help put our people in a little safer environment, I guess. So, and then a million other reasons we haven't thought of. So I hope this policy is not etched in stone. It's going to be modified as we learn more and on and on. So thank you.
Appreciate that, Director. Any other, Commissioner Beisel?
I would just add, I mean, it is good to do it carefully and do it right. But it's an incredible tool. We use it in our business, and it's just incredible what you can do with it. And it'll be so much easier on wildlife. It's just, don't be afraid to use a cool tool in the technology, because it can do some neat things for us.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that.
Thanks for not droning on, Dan.
That's so bad. Next up is the consent agenda. Unless anybody has any changes, I entertain a motion to approve it.
So moved.
Second.
Second from, I didn't.
Vale Peisel.
Commissioner Beisel.
I didn't want to drone on.
I think we can do this by voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Did I miss the public comment?
You did it.
Okay, so let me ask, is there any public comment? And we'll do the vote again. I don't see any. I apologize for that. Thank you, Nick. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I think next up is our legal report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And unfortunately, or I suppose fortunately, depending on your perspective, I don't have many legal updates to provide. I really don't have anything that we need to discuss in executive session. The two updates I'll provide, the Wild Earth Guardians case that involves the predator research studies that this commission and this division are engaged in is still sitting before the trial court. We have no decision in that case. As I've indicated previously, I think it's probably a good sign moving forward, but we're just awaiting a decision in that case. As I've indicated before, that's a case that will likely be appealed to the Court of Appeals. In the five-star feedlot fish kill case, as you know, we obtained a favorable decision back in April in that case. We are currently pursuing collection of that judgment. We have also recently agreed with the defendant to have the defendant pay costs of this agency for having to take the case to trial. So we've added a couple additional $1,000 to that judgment. Again, that is a case that I fully expect to be appealed. The appeal deadline is in 2 weeks, so things will start moving forward pretty quickly on that. I've provided you with a memo describing other legal matters and litigation that's ongoing. Provides a number of updates. I'm happy to discuss any of those. If there's questions, we can do so in executive session. Otherwise, I have nothing further to update.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? Well, thank you very much for all your help. We appreciate it. I believe that is our last item. I just want to thank everyone. I apologize to commissioners for being a little over, but I will just say that we will be over in every meeting I'm the chair if it's caused by public comment, because I think that's why we're here. So, thank you very much.